if you're out of work, you don't need to hear that other people are out of work too. You need to know that there's a plan to get you through this and get you back on the job. And that's exactly what this government is focused on.
And welcome back. Almost 2 million job losses and 13% unemployment. That's the grim snapshot of the economy we got from the latest job reports released today. What do the numbers tell us about the economy amid the pandemic? And what is left out of the report, and how is the economic downturn impacting women more than men? The press gallery is here with some insights. Our own CTV News reporter Molly Thomas is here. So is the Globe and Mail Ottawa bureau chief Robert Fife. And to make sense of the jobs numbers, we have economist Armine Yalnizyan. She's a fellow at the Atkinson Foundation who specializes in labor market trends. Hello to the three of you. Happy Friday. Armine, I want to start with you. Can you give us a quick overview of the April jobs report? Now, we spoke to the finance minister earlier. He seemed to think that perhaps 13% was a little bit low. Do you think the unemployment rate may be higher than 13%?
It might be, but it might be that the unemployment rate isn't the right metric to be looking at because, you know, the daily report from StatCan buried the lead. The lead was almost 37%, over a third of the potential labor force was idled. And that is the combination of both people who lost their jobs and lost hours of work. And that sounds a bit closer to what we know is happening all over the world with COVID, which is helping people stay at home so we can contain the contagion.
And the finance minister would not tell me how many jobs will be lost forever, how many businesses will shutter indefinitely. But we know, Armine, that women are impacted very differently. In this time, you know, sort of a gradual reopening, you have used two terms that I think are interesting. You call it a she-cession and a he-covery. So does that mean that men will be better off?
Oh, we don't know the answer to that immediately, but certainly what has happened in the last 2 months has turned a typical recession on its head. Now, mind you, this isn't a typical recession. This was us trying to stop everything that we do to only essential economic transactions. And what happened was that made it a service-led recession for the very first time in history. Normally, when we have some kind of economic downturn, it's goods-producing industries that are slowed down. And then later on, services also slowed down. This time, it was schools and childcare, non-local travel, retail, non-essential retail, hospitality, and personal services like nail and hair salons or yoga centers and stuff like that. So all of that stuff stopped. And that happened to be where most of the women and low-paid workers were. And that is historically unprecedented. And now when we're talking about recovery, we're seeing the same things happening all over the world: construction, infrastructure, gardening centers here in Ontario, marinas, golf courses. These are all he jobs. And the path to getting back the jobs that were lost for women is less clear. So that is of concern because mathematically, it doesn't matter how many men you pour into the economy to fast track infrastructure. There's not enough of a reserve army of men to make up for the volume of women who have lost their hours of paid work. And that has a huge impact on household incomes and household spending down the road.
Molly, you know, I want to get to the economic impact on women that we're just talking about, who make up for, you know, more than 50% of the workforce. So, but it seems that this reopening is more complicated logistically for women. Why?
Well, I think most of them, working mothers, are going to be thinking about their children. That is their first priority, and they have to figure out how to balance that. You know, they are the people that traditionally do the most unpaid labor. That includes chores and taking care of their kids. And now we don't really know what's happening to the kids. Quebec is the only province that has mused about opening schools next week. Nowhere else in the country. And we know there's daycares sporadically across the country. But even then, you have to remember, before the pandemic, daycare spots spots were so hard to get. And you have to think now they want to have more social distancing to protect those kids. That becomes an even harder spot to get into. And then you have to think about the hard decision as any parent, a male or female, about if you want to actually put your kids out there. So yes, your decisions around your career and your family are going to be very, very pertinent during this time and figuring out how you move forward. And that's going to affect the labor force for sure.
Bob, we talk a lot about, how this has affected, the older population, but how about these young people? This is a dream killer. This COVID-19 is a dream killer for anybody graduating, anybody getting into university, or young people who are entering the workforce. Several studies say folks entering the workforce during a recession will be negatively impacted for years. Now, how do you see this impacting the younger population or the millennials?
Well, my own daughter is an example. She works in the gig economy, and she doesn't have health care, and she is out of work and probably not going to be having a steady income until perhaps the fall. And but thankfully, unlike the 1930s, governments have stepped up and provided the CERB that pays people $2,000 a month, so that nobody is going to not be able to pay the rent. They're not going to have all the, they're not going to be able to have the best food, perhaps, but nobody's going to be in the situation in the 1930s where they were destitute. And but I think, Joyce, you hit the nail on the head, is that we have no idea what the impact is going to be on younger people or on women, for that matter. What's going to be the impact a few months from now when we slowly get our economy back sector by sector? There are still going to be a large number of people, it seems to me, that are likely to be out of work and probably are going to have to still rely on government help at some level to get themselves back on their feet and the economy begins to kick in. So this is a serious, serious problem. I don't think anybody really has the answers to it. And you and I, as you know, we watch the government every day, and we've talked to a lot of senior officials, and we know that they're grappling with this as well, and they don't have the answers to it.
Armine, I just have 30 seconds before our next break, but this is not a normal recession. We all know that. So what can we expect as a recovery? A very slow one? Do you see this lasting for months, for years?
Very good question. And I think everything points to, in these early stages of reopening, with men rebounding with their jobs much more quickly than women are likely to, for all the reasons that Molly raised and for the reasons that Robert Fife also raised with respect to the gig workers and how hard it's going to be to find jobs again. That for women in particular, given that childcare centers and schools could be the next vector of transmission of disease, and people are understandably twitchy about sending their kids into these places where, how are you going to do physical distancing with 25 kids or 30 kids that haven't seen each other for 2 months, right? It's going to be very, very challenging. They might not get sick, but they might very well become the transmitters for people who can be sick at home. And so consequently, we're looking at probably mostly women choosing to keep their kids at home for longer. This is what happened in New Zealand, where when the schools did open, very few people sent their kids back to begin with. So this is definitely something to watch. And the longer it goes on, the more businesses will perish in this process, and there will be fewer places for not only women to go back, but also childcare centers. A lot of them are going to actually have to shutter because they cannot survive with the loss of user fees. And as everybody knows in this country, user fees for childcare are the second biggest bite out of household budgets for young families, right after housing. And you have to pay for it whether you use it or not. So it's like when incomes fall, that's going to be something they cut out.